Awesome. Hello again, everybody. It is 6:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Jalen Wynn. I am the Senior Coordinator for Student Engagement in ELS, and welcome to Finance Summit. We're super excited that you're here. We're just going to spend some time together just to talk a little bit about things, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I do want to let the group know that this is being recorded, so you're welcome to turn your camera off if that's not something that you want to be a part of. But this session will be recorded and uploaded later on. So if Shelly and Taylor want to introduce themselves, you can go for it.
Hey y'all, my name is Shelly Chamar. I am a student here, but I also serve as the SGA treasurer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Taylor Kane. I serve as the Assistant Dean of Students and Director of Engagement, Leadership, and Service. And thank y'all for being here tonight.
Awesome. So just a bit of an overview of the night. So we're going to talk a little bit about fundraising, small club allocations, the diversity fund, and then all campus allocations. So we're going to do fundraising in small clubs, and then we'll have some time and diversity fund. And then we'll have some time to talk and have questions answered. You're welcome to put questions in the chat as we talk. If something comes up and you kind of want to get it answered in the moment, that's okay as well. And then at that point, after diversity fund, if you are not a part of all campus allocations, you are welcome to head out. But if you are, we encourage you to stay to hear Taylor talk about that and kind of get more information on that. But like I just said, just one more time, we'll go over fundraising, small club allocations, and the diversity fund, some time for questions, and then all campus allocations. And then obviously we'll have time for questions after that as well. So fundraising, any on-campus, like any registered student organization is able to fundraise. And what that really means is it's defined as an on-campus organization seeking funds or support by a student source that's not its members. So that's including the procurement of supplies and other forms of support, the selling or distribution of items, materials, products, or services, and then the sponsorships of events where admissions can be charged. So there's a lot of different variety within that. And some things that we commonly see and a lot of things that come through are bake sales. So a lot of people do bake sales. I'll be honest, I see a lot of people submit requests for bake sales often, and I get it because no one gets tired of a brownie. There's t-shirt sales, plant sales, there's monetary donations, selling event tickets, donation drives. It's really what works for you all and kind of what you enjoy doing and what you feel like would benefit your organization the most. But really, all of these things can apply to really anybody. So these are some really important solicitation policy reminders that we think are just vital when you're fundraising. The first and foremost thing is that when you fundraise, it cannot benefit an individual. So that means that when you are doing these fundraisers, it has to either benefit some type of organization within, like most people are doing it for a nonprofit, or it has to go back into your organization to benefit the members within it. But it cannot just benefit one individual. Vendors cannot be promoted on campus without approval. So when you do that fundraising request, which we'll talk about in just a second, you're going to see that we ask for the vendor. It has to be a UGA approved vendor. And we're going to look at that when we look at those. And you can find that list online easy if you just put UGA vendor approval. You also must include the plans for your proceeds in your application. Obviously, like I just mentioned, that you cannot use these to benefit an individual. So we do look to see what you use these for. We're obviously not going to police it to the greatest extent, but we want to make sure that these funds are being used for either, like I said, your organization, or maybe just a nonprofit or anything that you feel your organization feels passionate for. And then lastly, fundraisers cannot interfere with the mission of the university, meaning the University of Georgia, and making sure that you're following the protocols that we have. So when you want to fundraise, there is a form that you have to fill out, and we always ask that you fill it out at least 1 week prior to the event, especially when at a time, for instance, right now, everyone's wanting to do these really cool fundraisers during Valentine's Day, which I love, but it can be an influx. And so we do ask for that 1 week prior to the event, because we want to make sure that you get that approved, but we also know that we are just people. So we want to make sure that we have enough time to approve those for you all. When you do that, you will actually find it on the involvement network. It is on the front page. So if you go down and you look at important links, you'll see that fundraising request form for you to fill out. Things that ask are just things like proposed date and time and then location. And this is super important because especially if a lot of students fundraise at Tate or MLC maybe. And if you are fundraising, you actually have to get it approved by us before you get it. You are able to have that space within Tate, meaning we need to know if you want to do it in Tate so that Campus Reservations understands your needs as well. We also ask for co-sponsors. A lot of people don't use co-sponsors, but if you do, we would like to know. And then vendors, if applicable. You don't have to use a vendor within your fundraising, or just a lot of people do. And so if we do, like I said, we'll ask for that. And then approval for the use of UGA trademarks. So if you are selling either like merchandise like clothes or hats or stickers or anything, if it has a UGA trademark on it, you do have to use a trademark form, which is pretty easy to find. If you just look up UGA trademark form, it'll come up. You do have to get that approval form for us to see before we can approve your fundraising. So that's anything like dogs, UGA, University of Georgia, anything like that. And there's also resources that show you all the trademarks that we have. So, and then lastly, provisions for funds raised. Like I mentioned, we do want to see what you're doing with these funds. And so we are going to ask that. And most of the time it's pretty standard. So there are some limitations. Within commercial entities, they cannot be openly promoted, basically. So that's just like if you are, say, getting a donation from an ice cream shop, Ben and Jerry's. We can't openly promote Ben and Jerry's as on campus. It's a bit different. It gets a bit, I guess not fishy, but it can be a little different if it's a closed event. But if you're on campus fundraising, you cannot have commercial entities openly promoting. Second, raffles are illegal in Georgia. Unless permitted, there's a permit issued by the local sheriff's department. So most of the time, raffles just aren't going to happen. I've realized that a lot of people who maybe want the raffle kind of like a raffle, but it's not a raffle, they do a silent auction. And so if that's something that you may have been wanting to do and you realize you're not able to, look into that opportunity, because silent auctions are pretty great in itself. And then lastly, food must be prepackaged. So if you do want to do things like the bake sales, you just have to make sure that your food's prepackaged before it gets approved. We are not able to do homemade food items. And this is definitely because of COVID and just things that have rose from that. And so we're just keeping to that policy within this next year. I know that it was kind of up in the air at one point because we didn't know if we were going to continue. But if you are selling food, you just have to make sure that it's prepackaged before it's approved. And we will ask that when you fill out that form as well. Awesome. So that's just kind of a brief overview of fundraising. Like I said, we're going to have questions at the end. So if you have more questions, we can definitely talk through it. But I'm going to pass it off to Shelly for Small Club.
Hey, y'all. Okay, you can go on to the next one. Okay, so Small Club Allocations is a fund that the Student Government Association is in charge of allocating funds to other organizations. I'm assuming most organizations here are registered already, but if not, you can figure out how to be registered on the ELS website. But the fund is given to those that are registered already on campus. And this is essentially just to promote anyone who needs financial assistance, specifically in regards to a specific event or organizational travel. There's extremely strict guidelines on what these funds can be used on. So like I said, it can be used on travel or specific events, but it gets a little bit tricky when you are considering applying. So I'll go through that a little bit, and you're also welcome to ask me questions. But organizations can only apply one time every semester. So usually if you have a big event, or if you have a big travel, or if you have a competition, those kind of things, use the funds for that. Okay, so this is just a little overview of the process in general. So you're going to read the guidelines. I'm going to send a link. You don't have to look at it right now, but just keep it in your bookmarks for where everything about Small Club Allocations is on this website. So on this website, there's the guidelines. Again, they're very strict, and they look kind of lengthy they're only 2 pages, but it's just line by line. So it's kind of hard to read, but I really, really encourage you to read through it just because it, again, does get very strict. And so when you're applying, it's important to keep those in mind so that your application gets approved. So after that being said, make sure your event or travel is eligible to apply for the funds. And then you're going to apply through the involvement network on that website that I just set in the chat. There's going to be a link to the application and it's going to direct you to the involvement network. And so make sure you're signed in too, because I just tried to do that, but if it won't pop up unless you're signed in. So make sure you're signed in. And then after that, you're going to receive an email from myself up until I'm not the SGA treasurer anymore for a hearing date. And we meet every other Tuesday at 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. So make sure that's kept in mind when you're applying. And then you're going to prepare for the hearing. The hearing is not as intimidating as it sounds. It's very short. And it's just talking about the event and why you want money. And then you're going to await the decision from myself, and you're going to follow proper approval process afterwards, just because that process afterwards is also a little bit nitpicky. So yes, that's just an overview, but I'll go into each section a little bit more now. Okay. So like I said, funds are allowed to be allocated to registered organizations whose programs are going to directly benefit or serve a larger segment of the student body. So since your organization is registered on campus, that means that it will serve and benefit the student body. The funds can be allocated for travel to conferences, performances, competitions, or specific programs pertinent to the student body. So just as an example, because I know this can be a little wishy-washy for specific clubs, but I know, like, for example, Mock Trial had a competition and we provided them gas to travel there, and then we provided the registration fee for them to access into the competition. And then also another example is African Student Union is having an event in the Fine Arts Building, and we funded their reservation cost for that. So that's just a very, like, 2 brief examples of what you can use it for, but those are just more general. But you are also always welcome to ask me questions, because I know that can get tricky. And then we ask that all requests are submitted to the Involvement Network, or SGA, at least 4 weeks prior to the event or travel departure date. As long as it's in the Involvement Network, even if you don't get an email afterwards, as long as it's in there before 4 weeks, we can consider it. And then late requests will be denied unless deemed extraordinary by the committee. But usually everyone's really good about that. You can go next. Oh, wait. Yes, you did already go next. Sorry. Okay. So like I said, funds have to be used for worthwhile programs. This cannot include charitable causes, recognition awards, or banquets. So it's really not for, it's really for the event programming itself or competition or travel. It cannot be used for anything that's going to be given to as a gift or anything along those lines. It also cannot be used for alcoholic beverages, food, or lodging. Those are, or to fund scholarships. Those are specifically things that you are 100% not allowed to apply for, and the committee will not fund you allocations for that. And then if the committee approves the funding request, the reimbursement must be claimed 30 days of the event, or within 30 days of the event or travel. I'll put you in contact with Becky Garrett, who works in the ELS with our finances, and she's going to help you with the reimbursement process. So something that you might not already know, but the small club allocations funds work on a reimbursement process. So this is not just money that goes into your account as a registered organization. Once you have the event, we will reimburse that fund to that person. So it's really just what you use is what you will get back. It's not excess money in that sense. Okay, so the application itself, this is a little bit confusing, or harder to get to, but you can go to the SGA website and then you can look under initiatives and you'll see small clubs, or you can just follow the link that I just sent in the chat. That might be easier, but on that website, there is guidelines, and then there's a PowerPoint explaining everything. And then there's the link to the application. And then there's also a link to previous allocations. So that website is going to be a good place to find all your information, and also my email's on there if you need to email me. But make sure you read through the guidelines before applying. Failure to adhere to the guidelines could result in not being allocated any funds, just because they're so specific. And then I'm going to show you what the application looks like, but there is a section on there that asks for you to show the budget breakdown of the event. So this needs to be extremely specific to how much it's going to be, how much you're requesting from small clubs, and then also any other sources of funding that you might be receiving from any other entities at the university, or a donation or anything along those lines. Also, like if you're ticketing for the event, just be sure to include all of that. And then you might forget, because I think it gets kind of lost in there, but make sure you click submit so that I get access to it. Okay. And then, like I said, after you submit your application, you're going to receive an email from the SGA treasurer, myself, to schedule a hearing date. Or if your application was submitted incorrectly, then I'll email you to discuss how we can fix it for you to be able to resubmit it and get those allocations. So I'll schedule a hearing date. Again, we meet every other Tuesday at 8 a.m. So it'll be starting like on the 15th, every other Tuesday from the 15th, just for your own knowledge. And this is where you'll present for 3 to 5 minutes, and then the committee will ask you questions for the remainder of the time. So it's at most 10 minutes. It's really not intimidating at all. And then if application is filled out incompletely, I'll email you and we'll discuss how to fix it. Okay, so this is the second page of the small club allocations application. The first page is just some introductory things, but so this just gives you an overview. So you're going to do the name of the program, travel. So like if you're going to South Carolina for a competition, you're going to put that in there. Location, that's where you can put location, dates, that's pretty self-explanatory. And then explain in detail, just like a little paragraph. And then how will this event benefit the university as a whole? Same thing, little paragraph, expected attendance. You can use this based on past years, or if it's a competition, you might know exactly how many people are going. And that's definitely beneficial for how many people, for that committee to use that knowledge. And then you can do the total estimated cost of the program travel. So this is total. And then the next line is how much you're requesting from small clubs. So those are it could be different numbers. It could be the same number. And then what will the requested funds go towards? You're going to explain exactly like the breakdown of how your budget and how the small club allocations funding can help with that. And then you're going to upload. So I talked about having to upload a breakdown of the expenses. So right at the bottom, you're going to click this upload file. You can do an Excel sheet, a Word document, whatever your preferred form is. Excel sheet is probably the most easiest, but you can just write like each line items. You can just write like Kretz reservation, $100, something like that. It's simple, but it's important that you include all the details of that. Okay, and then the hearing itself. Once you submit that, again, I'll be in contact about your hearing date. Arrive to your hearing at least 10 minutes in advance. You don't have to write that down now if you're writing anything down, but I'll send that in the email. When you submit your application to schedule your hearing date, I'll say, make sure you arrive 10 minutes in advance. And then the hearing is not going to last more than 10 minutes. And you're not allowed to use any materials, use like a PowerPoint presentation, a poster, or anything like that. It's just going to be you talking. So just talk. I usually just tell people to talk about the organization, what it's about, and then go into into the item that they're requesting for, and then how much, talk about the numbers, and then the committee will ask questions for the remainder of the time. And then also on that section of the application, there is a part where you can say, if the person that's submitting the form is not going to be at the hearing, you can put a presenter name. So make sure that that person has all the correct information. If you put it on the form, I'll email that person along with you when you're submitting the application, so that they're in knowledge, but make sure that they know everything about what you submitted and everything like that, so that when we ask questions, they're not confused about the answer. Okay, so just some reminders, I'm Shelly Chamar, I'm the SGA treasurer. So if you have any questions about this, please email me. Again, it's on that website that I sent in the chat. So I am always open to questions. I know that this process can be kind of confusing. And so I've had plenty of Zoom meetings with people asking me about if this program or if this event or if this travel counts. So I 100% if you want to contact me before you apply, I will answer you. So, and always here to answer the question. So, really important. So if you apply for small club allocations or the Student Affairs Diversity Fund for 2 consecutive years, which they're about to talk about the Student Affairs Diversity Fund, you are eligible to apply for all campus allocations. So that's, it happens in the spring. And so since it's already started, you won't be able to do it this semester, but for the following spring, if you have applied in 2 consecutive years, and that means the school year, so for example, it would be last year and this year, you can apply for all campus allocations, which Taylor will talk more about, but it's essentially a way to have access to more funds for different types of events. And it doesn't have as much strict, it does have guidelines, but just not as strict. So encourage you to apply for 2 consecutive years so that you can use that. And that is all. So thank you so much for listening. Again, if you have so many questions, please reach out to me. I'm always here to answer them. And I know it can be very confusing. So yes.
Thanks, Shelly. I think Shelly's going to stick around for a few more minutes. So if you have questions and you didn't want to raise your hand to ask on Zoom, feel free to throw your questions in the chat and she can answer as they come in. But we want to briefly share with you too, the Diversity Fund. While folks on this call are not part of the facilitation or allocation of this fund, the Division of Student Affairs offers additional funding for student organizations looking to host events that have pretty broadly any type of theme or topic related to diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging. And so if that applies to your organization or to an event that you are hosting, I would encourage you to look up more information around the Student Affairs Diversity Fund. We have a shortened bit.ly link here to the left of your screen, but you can also just Google Student Affairs Diversity Fund or UGA Student Affairs Diversity Fund for more information. And again, similar to the small clubs allocations process, this is the reimbursement of cost for one-time events, programs, or travel. So the Diversity Fund and small clubs are similar in that it's a one-time allocation. And what we're getting ready to talk about here in a moment is all campus allocations, which is an annual budget that you are allocated funds for the entire year. So that's where we're at so far. And Shelly, or we can go ahead. Shelly, I don't know if there were questions in here. It looks like we're already getting them answered. But we had one question around allocation funding rollover from semester to semester. We're going to talk about small club or all campus here in a moment, but none of the allocation process that we're talking about this evening roll over from year to year. Semester to semester, if you request funding from small clubs or the Diversity Fund, say at the end of the fall semester, yes, you may still have the opportunity to use them in the beginning of the spring semester, but that money, if it's not used within 30 days, it would return to the overall budget or pot of funds available to other organizations. So funds do not roll over from year to year, and really it's a one-time allocation. So we can go ahead, Jalen, and switch over to all campus allocations. Before we get started into all campus allocations, are there any other additional questions regarding specifically Diversity Fund, small clubs, or fundraising? That way, if you're not sticking around for the all campus allocations, we can answer those questions so you can get out of here. Anything else? All right, Jalen, you want to go to the next slide?
There you go.
All right, so all campus allocations, you can keep going to the next one. All campus allocations is an annual process that is facilitated by the Dean of Students Business Office and really overseen and done by a group of students led by Shelly Chumar, who you just met. SGA has the opportunity to help allocate these funds. It's really important that students understand who are coming before this process that the decisions are voted on and made and recommended by your peers. While there are staff that help with the process, All campus allocations is meant to be for students by students. And so student leaders get the opportunity to hear from their peers on the work that they're doing, on the benefit for the student body, and get to allocate funds based on the needs of those organizations. So by this point, all of you who are hopefully on the call are either just curious about all campus allocations, or you have received your budget materials to submit to the business office here in just a couple of weeks for the annual all campus allocations process. Now, I know some of you on the call are doing this for the first time. Some of you, this may be the second or third time that you've done this. But we're going to go through this as if everyone has never done it before. And so what we're going to share with you are some tips and tricks. Hopefully by now, what you have already done is seen the information sent to you by the Dean of Students Business Office. It was sent to you by June wind date. It was likely, if you were a student leader on the call, it was likely sent to your student organization advisor, which I think I see one or two on the call right now. So if you have not received that, I would reach out to your advisor and say, hey, I would really like to see that email that Miss June wind date sent from the business office, because in that email, which I think she puts in the subject line of the email, it's budget time. She sent those emails out last week to all student organizations that are able to register and submit budget proposals for all campus allocations. Attached to that email were full detailed instructions, budget templates, as well as general and personalized recommendations for each budget. It is extremely important, and the title of this slide is pre-work. It's extremely important that you review all the material that's attached to that email, because in all likelihood, if you have questions, the answer is there. And certainly if you have additional ones, there are going to be folks that are certainly willing and able to help answer them for you, but there's a good chance that all the information that you need is in that email. As a quick reminder, fiscal year 23 budgets. So fiscal year runs from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. That's the fiscal year. Very similar to the academic year in that it kind of starts in the fall semester, ends in the middle of the summer. But the fiscal year, all these budget requests are due by February 16th at 3 p.m., not 5 p.m., not midnight, 3 p.m. They will not accept late submissions. You have to get it in by 3 p.m. on February 16th. We're going to talk about this in just a moment, the importance of the supplemental information. Each organization is allowed the opportunity to provide additional information and context about their group. I would highly recommend that, but we'll kind of show you in a moment what that might be able to look like or what to include in that. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide, Jalen. One of the things that I promise that we will do here in a moment is we'll open up a sample budget template so that you can look at it. It's the exact one that was attached to the email that came from the business office, but I'm going to go through that at the end here one by one so that if you have questions or when we point out things as we go along, I'll be happy to do that. After you submit all of your materials, which is essentially the request of the amount of money that you're asking for the next year. In addition to that information, you're also going to include what you spent your funds on in at least the last 2 years as applicable. Now, for some groups, if you're going through this process for the very first time, you may not have that information. And so you may be completing those budget material spreadsheets to the best of your ability. But if you're a student organization that has already had an all-campus allocation student activity fee budget, it's going to be expected that you complete that information from previous school years or previous fiscal years as supplement to what you're requesting for the next year, right? It would make sense that they'd want to know how have you spent your money before in order to know what you're wanting to spend it on in the coming year. Like I mentioned earlier, all campus allocations is comprised of undergraduate and graduate students, both representatives from the Student Government Association, the Graduate Student Association, and student leaders that are nominated by administrators in the Division of Student Affairs. So while there are staff, yes, that help with the process simply as ex officio members, all of the members who make the recommendation and vote on the decisions are students here at UGA. Hearings this year will happen in person, barring any craziness from COVID. The last 2 years they've been done on Zoom, and I think sometimes it can be really hard to make your case as best you can or completely explain yourself. And our hope is to be able to do all of the hearings in person this year. Included in the email with your budget materials was the date, time, and location of your hearing. Please make sure you put that on your calendar. Similar to the small clubs allocations, when Shelley was sharing to please show up 10 minutes early, we asked that you show up 15 minutes early for these hearings. You'll be allowed 15 minutes per presentation. Sometimes the committee gets a little ahead of time and things start to really move smoothly and quickly. And so oftentimes if we're ahead of schedule, if you're already here, we'll go ahead and let you come on in to give your presentation. So we do ask that you get there a little bit early so that you're able to go as soon as we're ready to have you come in. In addition, and this is why that supplemental information piece is so important, you're not allowed when you come into the hearing to pass out any handouts or visuals. We're not going to be queuing up your PowerPoint presentation. It's expected that everything that you submitted on February 16th tells the story that you need it to, right? That you've submitted your budget proposal, you've submitted your supplemental information as applicable, and that you're ready to talk about and answer questions regarding your budget proposal. This is a recommendation of what the breakdown of your presentation should likely look like. This is purely a recommendation from someone who has sat on this committee in one way or another, or who has presented to this committee over the last 8 years. I'm speaking from a little bit of experience, but I would recommend that you only spend about half of the time allotted to you making your presentation and your argument for the funds that you're requesting, right? You're going to maybe explain very briefly what your organization is, what you do, your mission on campus, maybe some of the major events that you host throughout the year. And then you're going to talk about why you need the funds that you're requesting for the next year. Why is it imperative and critical to the success of your organization to receive that funding from the all-campus allocations process? The reason why I say to only use half of the time that you're allotted is because the committee has the ability to ask you questions, to clarify things that you've said, or to see things in your budget proposal that may be interesting to them, or they may have questions about or confused about. And so I would strongly recommend that you make sure you provide the remaining time to have questions from the committee be asked of you. That's going to allow the committee to get from you what they're really hoping to better understand. It allows them to clear up any confusion among the committee. And it also just allows some time there at the end to make sure everyone's clear on what folks are asking about. So I would encourage you to practice this a few times through. Student organizations that see a good amount of success and maybe more confidence going into the hearing process are those that have practiced. I would encourage you to not only practice your presentation, that you're just going to sit down at a table and speak to the committee. You don't even have to stand up for your presentation. We're going to give you a chair and a table to sit behind. You're welcome to bring notes with you to your presentation to refer to. And I always tell students in preparing for this process, try to brainstorm questions that you think the committee might ask you. So what do you think, if you look back over the course of the last year or 2 years that you have to share, right? You've got to report on what you've spent the last year or two. Are there things that stick out to you on your budget submission that you're like, I bet they're going to ask us about that, because maybe that event costs more than what most people might think it should cost. Or maybe our cost per person was higher because our attendance wasn't as high at that event. Those might be questions the committee will ask you. And so my recommendation is to brainstorm and be critical, right? Look through with a fine-tooth comb your information to be able to determine, what do I think the committee of my peers might ask me about my budget proposal? And then what's my answer to that question? Student organizations who think through those difficult pieces, right? What are the tough questions they might ask? If you've already prepared an answer for that question, jot down some notes and have those notes in front of you when you come to the hearing. That way, if there's a person who raises their hand and says, hey, University Union, I'd like to know why, y'all spent $3,000 on this one event and only 20 people came, right? I'm just making up an example, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but it may be something that would be alarming to someone on the committee and say, well, then why didn't you have more than 20 people come? Hopefully, University Union or XYZ student organization has thought through, you know what, they might ask me that question, and I'm going to have a couple of notes, and I'm going to refer to my notes down here on my paper that I brought in here with me as a little bit of your cheat sheet, right? The goal of this process is to not trip you up or to have you fail or to be embarrassed by a question that you might get. The goal of this process is for you to make your best argument, to make your best case, to have your peers hear you out so that you can get the amount of money that your organization needs to be successful in the next year. This is meant to be a supportive process, and that's why you've got not only the Dean of Students Business Office, SGA through Shelley Chumar, as well as the staff and engagement leadership and service here to help you prepare your materials or answer questions as you have them, and host finance summits, right, for you to be prepared for this process. So those are a couple of tips and tricks that I would strongly recommend. And as we go to the next slide, in terms of a few reminders, these are the things that I think will likely make you the most successful in preparing for this process. I cannot stress this enough. Do not procrastinate. February 16th will sneak up on you faster than you realize. While this process provides 3 weeks for full preparation and submission of materials, there are so many folks who will wait till the last minute. This happened with a student organization that I advised a couple of years ago. I had sent them everything the afternoon that I got it from the business office. I sent it to the treasurer of the organization and the president of the group. And I said, all right, y'all, let's go ahead and get started. And we set up a meeting for the next week. I went through everything with them on what they needed to have prepared and done. And I said, all right, and it's your responsibility, to go through this stuff. I expect, hopefully you'll schedule another meeting with me as your advisor to maybe look over some of the things that you're thinking and get ready for. Well, I did not hear from them for the next 2 weeks. And when I'd ask them about it, they're like, oh yeah, we're working on it. Well, 48 hours before everything was due, they decided to start working on it. And when I tell you they freaked out, I mean, they freaked out and blew up my phone, tried to hunt me down in the office and freaking out that they didn't have their stuff done. I cannot stress to you how important it is to not procrastinate. Go ahead and knock this thing out. Get it done. Y'all got midterms coming up. You got spring break coming up. Go ahead and knock this out. It will not take as much time if you've kept pretty good records of what you've done in the last year. And here's the thing, if you have not kept great records of what you have done in the past year, you've at least given yourself more time to get some of that stuff together. I mentioned this earlier. Please make sure that you read all of the instructions. Miss June in the business office, that is, I think, the first attachment on everyone's email is the instructions for the entire process, not only on reminders for the hearing itself, but how to fill out and complete the budget templates in Excel. Next, just as a quick reminder, and you'll see this in a moment when we go over the sample budget template, but your income and expenses lines have to be the same amount. So if that doesn't make sense right now, I'll show you in a minute why that's important. Obviously, the gist of that being that you shouldn't be asking for more money than you intend to spend, nor should you be planning to spend more money than you intend to ask for, right? You have to ask for the amount of money that you actually say you need based on the expenses for the upcoming year. The budget template, and this is just a quick little reminder, the budget template doesn't support adding cents to dollar projections, so use whole numbers. So instead of putting something costs $100.23, just put it costs $100 or $101. Please use whole numbers when you're doing your budget projections. Do not change, and this should be pretty difficult to do, but somehow every year somebody figures out a way to mess these up. Don't mess with any of the formatting or the appearance of the templates. Most of the cells are locked so that you can't change them. There's a lot of formulas in the Excel document so that things are adding up for you and doing the math for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So please don't try to resave it and unlock cells. You're going to want to make sure you leave the template the way that it is. Reason being, we print a lot of this information, and so it's got to say the correct format. We also don't want the math to get messed up, because in all likelihood, all that's going to do is be a detriment to you. So don't try to mess with the template at all. Use what's been provided to you. If for some reason you're having a problem with the template, reach out to the business office for assistance. Make sure you provide enough detail for the committee to have a good understanding of your organization. Sometimes we'll have groups come in and they assume, we have student orgs come in and they assume that the committee members know what their organization is and what they do. Now, it's an expectation, and what we share with the committee members is that, hey, you need to do your homework. We provide them all the budget materials at least 2 weeks in advance. We do a full training with the committee members as well. And so they're expected to do their homework and to look over everyone's documents before the hearings take place. But I think you're putting your best foot forward and doing the best job you can when you provide a little bit more detail on who you are. And the big thing that I mentioned earlier that I'll stress again, who your organization is, what you do on campus, and why is that important, right? Why is that important to the student experience? What are you contributing to the University of Georgia student community? How are you making the student experience better on campus, right? Maybe it's helping students find friends and build community. Maybe it's providing like-minded groups for engagement, whether it's hobbies or passion areas. Maybe it's providing community for folks of shared identity, right? For marginalized and minoritized communities. If those things are important to your organization, what are the goals and values your group has, and how do you contribute to the UGA experience? Those things are important to share because those are the things you can't put a dollar amount on, right? You're getting ready to ask for money, but I think it's also important you stress the quality of the experience that your organization provides to UGA. And then finally, you really should consider making sure that you do the supplemental information. There's more information in the budget email that came out from the business office about what's allowed, but simply put, for the sake of time, each budget that is submitted is allowed a 2-sided 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with information on both sides, right? And it's to provide additional information about what your student organization is, what you accomplished over the course of the past year, how you used the money. Some examples of things in the past that I have seen student organizations do is provide maybe quick pictures of events that they hosted so that people can kind of put a picture in their mind of what maybe your big event for the year looked like. Maybe it's a group or a crowd or an audience that attended your event. Maybe it's a social media post, right? Or a poster from one of your events to kind of just show off in greater detail visually what that event was. I've also seen student organizations use those supplemental worksheets or forms to provide maybe attendance numbers across the whole, or to show on a chart or a graph increases in engagement, whether that's social media followers or engagement on some social media platforms. Maybe that's the increase of attendance over the course of the years of their organization. Maybe that's the increase in membership in their organization, right? That maybe your organization's 20 years old, but in the last 3 years, you've seen 100% membership increase, right? Your organization's doubled in size. Information like that might help explain why maybe you'd be asking for more funds from the previous year, right? So this is your opportunity to visually tell your story and to state your case. Organizations who do this, I think it shows an extra effort of going kind of above and beyond. And typically the committee is extremely impressed when organizations provide that additional information. It goes the extra effort and it sticks yourself out there. It also just looks good. Oftentimes, a lot of organizations will use someone or ask someone in their organization to who's good at graphic design or can use Canva to be able to kind of put that together. It's a nice little cherry on top, if you will, that just kind of makes your organization kind of stand out. So I would strongly encourage you to include that. And there's additional information in that budget email from the business office on what the stipulations of those are. So I think we're going to shift gears here, and I'm now going to open up the sample budget template. So I'm going to share my screen, Jalen, so you can stop sharing. And as y'all have questions, please feel free to put them in the, to put them in the chat. Hold on one second while I've got to update my system preferences. I just got a new laptop and I have not updated this on Zoom. All right. I will be right back, Jalen. It's making me restart Zoom. I'm so sorry about that, y'all. Hopefully you didn't miss me too much because I am back in action, sharing my screen. All right, so I'm gonna pull up the budget template. And Jalen, can you nod or give me a thumbs up if you can see the Excel spreadsheet? All right, we'll make sure we're doing this right. So this is the budget template that was attached to the email. And hopefully you can see this okay. The font is a little tiny. But if you're like me, you might just have to get a little closer to your computer screen. So the budget template that was attached was one that was completely made up by the business office. And I'm gonna go as in great a detail as I can. If at any point you're like, hold on, I'm not sure about this, raise your hand on Zoom or unmute yourself. We're all friends here. And I'm happy to walk through something a little more slowly to help explain it. But I'm hopeful that this will kind of give you a little bit of a walkthrough of what the different boxes on this spreadsheet mean. So for each budget that you are submitting for, which for most of you, there's probably just the one budget for your student organization, you're going to complete this Excel spreadsheet and you're going to complete, don't forget all the tabs along the bottom. That organization I told you all about from a couple of years ago that was like, oh yeah, we're working on it. Well, he thought that was only this first page. And he was like, oh, that's easy. Well, he missed all these tabs along the bottom, and that's why he had that moment of panic. So we'll quickly kind of go through this. We'll start with, obviously, you providing the name of the student organization that's requesting the money, and then adding in your mission statement. You'll also notice as I click some of these boxes, there's additional instructions here to make note of. A lot of organizations, when they complete this, now you can create a mission statement, but here's something I know all of you have as a mission statement because you had to submit a constitution. And oftentimes your constitution, your student organization constitution has your mission statement in it. So make it easy on yourself. Just copy and paste that thing into this box, right? This is to help the committee understand what your organization sets out to do. Next, you're going to list the specific goals that your organization works and puts and implements or strives for in order to achieve your mission. So these are going to be specific to your organization. For some groups, say that I'm going to stick with University Union as an example, the Student Programming Board. If their mission, and I'm going to get it wrong, so if anyone from unions in here, don't blame me, but if their mission is to host events to help students make friends and build community, one of their goals to achieve that mission might be to bring entertaining events that students actually want to see, right? That might be one of their goals, right? We're not going to bring people that folks don't want to see. We're going to bring events that people are interested in. Another one of their goals might be to recruit more members, right? So that we can have a greater, broader reach. But again, these are going to be goals specific to your student organization. Under general organization information, this is relatively self-explanatory. You're going to list the number of members who are currently active in your student organization. You're going to answer whether or not your student organization collects dues, meaning do you charge people to be a member of your group? For the most part, organizations do this to help supplement or offset costs throughout the year. And so if you do, you're going to answer yes. And then you're going to answer how much you charge each person. And then if you have any sources of generated income, if you collect dues, that would be a source of generated income. And you may also have other things that you do. You may take donations from alumni. You may ask your members to donate money. You may do percent nights off campus at local restaurants to raise additional money. And so what you'll need to put in here is the total amount that you receive from dues, and then anything in addition to dues. Most of our student organizations who go through all campus allocations, some of them collect dues for additional funds. But oftentimes that might be the only additional income. One other additional income that we'll see from a lot of groups who host big events throughout the year, I'm really thinking some of our international student life groups that are on the call. If you charge admission to your events, this would also be a place where you would potentially budget out or predict how much money you may make from those events throughout the year. The reason why that's important is because the amount that you put in this box, so for the sake of this example, it's $535. That's going to be, or excuse me, that's the attendance. The amount you put from 335 times 10 is 350. That total amount is going to be under expected generated income. So that amount of money goes into your budget in terms of the amount of income your organization will report for the next year. This is the money your organization will raise yourself. And then the total annual attendance, I'm sorry, I was clicking this box earlier. My mouse was in the way, but this box here is how many people attended your events over the course of the past year. So you'll see that in a minute. It does the math for you, but we'll go to that in just a second when we click on some of these other spreadsheets along the bottom. But again, 35 times 10 for the sake of this example, $350. So that's the expected generated income. You're going to want to include any additional funds that you would raise from events that you host, fundraisers that you host, because that amount would go into your total income amount here. Now, the other piece of your income is how much you request from student activity fee allocation, or the all campus allocations process. This number in the box here highlighted in green is the amount of money that you're asking for from the all campus allocations process for the next year. If you add that amount to the amount that you expect to generate yourself, that's going to give you the total income amount. Now, you may be thinking, well, income is what you get when you work at a job and you make money, right? For the sake of all campus allocations, this is the money that would be coming into your organization that either you are responsible for generating, right, through the events that you host, the dues that you collect, the fundraisers you facilitate, or it's the money allocated to you from this process. So a little different than what a lot of people think of when they think of income. But this is the money that will be in your budget, okay? The expenses piece over here, you're going to have two different types of expenses that all campus allocations ask you to report on. You have general expenses, which for the most part are operational costs for your organization. And then you're going to have activity expenses. Activity expenses are going to be more event or travel related, or excuse me, event or competition related expenses. If you're an organization, like for example, we have a debate student organization that comes through this process, right? Their registration fees for their debate competitions would be an activity expense because it's something they're going and doing, they're participating in it. These numbers together will total their total expenses. So if you think back to that second slide I presented on all campus allocations, I said that total expenses and total income had to match. And so you'll notice on this sample budget, 3,750, 3,750, those two numbers match. The reason why that is important is because you can't have more expenses than the amount of money that you plan to have in your budget. In addition to that, you can't have less money in your budget than what you intend to spend, right? These numbers have to match. This is probably the biggest thing that trips up organizations when they go and submit their budget proposals. And it's the first thing Miss June's going to check when you email these budget proposals to her is if these two numbers match. They have to match. You shouldn't be asking for an amount of money that does not match what you intend to pay for. They have to match. I know that sounds like a broken record, but it's the biggest mistake I see student organizations make. And if you send this thing to her at 2:59 and these numbers don't match, she's going to email it back to you and say, hurry up and fix this because these numbers have to match. This bottom part here is the previous student allocation that you received in the last fiscal year, if applicable. If you're going through this process for the first time, there's nothing in these boxes because the business office fills these boxes in for you. So you can't change these numbers on your budget spreadsheets. The fiscal year 22 is the current fiscal year we're in. We call an annual budget year a fiscal year, FISCAL, fiscal. And the fiscal year, like I mentioned, runs from the beginning of July through the end of June of the next year. So we're currently in fiscal year 22. And so for the sake of this example, this organization was allocated $3,000 last year. And the number here is the balance remaining at the end of halfway through the fiscal year. So if the fiscal year starts July 1st, 6 months, exactly 6 months later is December 31st of that year, right? That is 6 months, that's halfway point. And so what the business office has put in this cell on the spreadsheet is how much was remaining in this organization's budget at the 6 month mark. I'll share with you really quickly why this number may or may not be important, because you may get a question about it from the allocations committee. I've seen before when these numbers, for the sake of this example, 3,000, 1,650 is a little more than half of 3,000, right? Half would be 1,500. This one's pretty standard. 6 months in, this organization has spent almost half of their budget and they still have half of the fiscal year left. For some of your budgets, you may have a spring semester where you're far more active, you host more events, you travel more, you're more active on campus. Maybe you didn't do as much in the fall semester because we're still going through a global pandemic and you've been more cautious and haven't wanted to host as many in-person events. And so instead you're like, okay, but we feel a little more comfortable with the spring. I'm not projecting here. Obviously, you all make those decisions for your particular organizations, but I have a feeling that might be some examples that may resonate with some of you. Because of that, some of you may have a very large number, like more than half of your budget remaining for the second half of the fiscal year. Please do not panic if that's the case, right? So if this would be your organization and you were allocated $3,000 and you still had $2,500 left, there's probably a pretty good explanation for why that is. Maybe the one big event that you host every year is not until February. And so, of course, you're going to save your money for your big February event. The reason why I point this out to you is the committee, the allocations committee may ask you clarifying questions about it. So just be prepared for that. We're going to quickly kind of show you these next few spreadsheets. And I want to just remind folks, obviously, we promised as close as we could, this would be about an hour long. So if you've got to hop off, we're recording this, so you're welcome to go back and watch it later. We'll send out the recording to everyone who attended. But I'll go through these and we'll stay as long as we need to answer the questions that folks have. So for each of the tabs along the bottom, there are essentially 6 things that you need to report. For each of the 2 previous fiscal years and the next fiscal year, you're going to report the activity expenses and the general expenses for each of those years. So you're going to be reporting that for the next year, the current year, and the last year. So what you'll see here is the first 2 tabs are the requested budgets. You're going to list all of your activities as best you can in chronological order. If you don't have an exact date like September 5th, 2022, you're welcome to put a range of dates or the month and year that you plan to do it. Or I've seen some people even put like fall semester in the date. You're going to put what the event or project was. Again, these are activity expenses. So these are going to be events, typically going to be cost related to events that you host. The location of your event, how many people attended that event. A good way to differentiate the difference between activity expenses and general expenses is that in all likelihood, activity expenses are going to have an attendance associated with it, right? It was something you did that people could attend, whether that was members of your organization or students in the student body who might have come, but you're going to have an attendance to report. For most organizations who go through all campus allocations, you are affiliated or advised with the Division of Student Affairs. If you're struggling to remember what your attendance was for your event, check with your student organization advisor because they should have tracked attendance at your event and can provide that data to you so that you have an accurate count. Okay. Next, you're going to report what the total cost of that event was. And then the spreadsheet itself is going to calculate for you what the cost per person was. It kind of cut off the per person piece, but that's what this number is. right? So $175 divided by 30 people who attended is $5.83 per person. You're going to do this for all expected expenses that are related to events for the next fiscal year. So this is for July 2022 through June 2023. Things that may be included might be retreats that you host for your student organizations, team building like ropes course at recreational sports, invited speakers, potentially end-of-year recognition events that you hosted, general body meeting reservations, and how many people came to those. And then one other is a service experience that they hosted. And you'll even see on this that 15 people came, they recorded it, but they didn't spend any money on it. So maybe it didn't cost anything, but they wanted to also share that they did that, which I think gives a pretty good record of what they intend to do. So this is everything that this organization plans to do for the next fiscal year. You've got additional notes here that I would encourage you to read over and review. And then when you scroll down here to the bottom, like I mentioned earlier, this Excel spreadsheet is formula operated in that it goes ahead and adds up the total expected cost based on all of the numbers in this column under cost. So it adds up all the numbers. That's your total expected cost for activity-related expenses for the entire year. How many people you anticipate will come to your event. You're going to do your best guess, right? You don't know how many people are going to come, but sometimes you can use previous year's attendance to indicate how many people are going to potentially attend. And then what your anticipated average cost per head will be, okay? So that's activity-related expenses. Next, we'll shift over to general expenses. It's oftentimes, I think, pretty easy to equate these to more operationally based expenses. Examples of these might be, okay, the reservation costs for participating in orientation, purchasing buttons or stickers to help advertise your group. I've seen some student organizations that have bought, flyers for their organization to promote an interest meeting, or, the tabling at engagement fairs, for example. So some of the things that you might hand out, if you buy promotional items, those would be a general expense. And so I'm trying to look if there's any other things. Looks like student travel. So student travel is going to go under operational expenses. If that applies to your organization, you're going to put each travel event separate. So if you have multiple travel that you attend each year, you would list them separately from one another. And again, you're going to do your best to put them in chronological order. And these are estimated costs. Obviously, this is not money that's been spent yet. For some things, you may already know what it costs. Orientation reservations may pretty much stay the same every year. So you may be able to say, okay, we think that's going to cost $100. But again, you're going to use your best judgment to budget out what you think these things will cost. And again, the spreadsheet will do the math for you and go ahead and add up the total. So for the sake of this example, the general expenses were $1,900. The activity-related expenses were $1,850, and the budget spreadsheet went ahead and added that up, and that came to a total of $3,750, right? There's that $1,900, there's that $1,850, and there's $3,750. So since this organization knew that they were going to charge their members $10 a person, and they were going to generate their own $350, that meant from the all campus allocations process, they only need to request $3,400, which brings them to a total income that matches their total expenses. All right, I feel like I flew through that, but hopefully it's starting to make sense. I'll quickly share on these other 4 tabs. You're going to do the exact same thing, but for most of this information, you already know the answers to these questions. You already know the activities that you've held at least up until February 16th, right, when you submit these budget proposals. For anything that you have not hosted yet, so if you're hosting events, activities, or have anticipated costs that will be after February 16th, you're going to do exactly what you did for the next fiscal year spreadsheets, and you're going to use your best judgment, and you're going to estimate what those costs will be, and you're going to estimate what you think the attendance will be. Something that's very important that the committee will potentially pay attention to. If the event has already occurred they're expecting that you put the correct attendance number, right? So this is not a time to round up and be like, oh, I think 100 people came last October to that event that we hosted. But if you scanned IDs and the involvement network says that 53 people came, you should be putting 53 people in your attendance. It's important that you lead and do this process with integrity and honesty, because that's what this process requires, right? This is student activity fee money, and so it's expected that you do this process truthfully to the best of your ability. So you'll attach the attendance that you already know, the total cost of the event. Again, you shouldn't have to guess what the event cost if it's already occurred and you've already paid for those costs. You should be able to total that amount up, and then the budget will do the math for you in terms of telling you what the cost per person was. You'll do the same thing for general expenses for the current fiscal year. And then finally, I'll skip over to fiscal year 21. Fiscal year 21 was last year, right? So this was the fiscal year that ended in June 2021. And some of you may be thinking to yourself, well, we didn't get a budget allocation that year. Well, you may be able to report what you do remember or what you did track. But if you did get an all campus allocation for fiscal year 21, you're expected to complete these two spreadsheets. One again for activity expenses, and then one for general expenses. If you do not have access to this information, my best recommendation is to reach out to your student organization advisor, who may have receipts and spreadsheets that tracked that information to be able to help provide you a clearer picture and be able to provide some of the information through this process. So I'm going to stop here and see if there are questions regarding this spreadsheet, regarding the hearing process, regarding the supplemental information. We'll answer whatever we can. And again, like I said, we'll stay as long as we need to. If there are a lot of questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat or raise your hand and ask in person. But I'll stop now to see if we have any questions. All right, well, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for now. Jalen, you're welcome to put the PowerPoint back up if you want to, because we can share our email address with everybody, because we may have folks on the call that are like, I am not answering questions in front of these people. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put myself out there. That's fine too. You can email our office. We are just ugaels@uga.edu. I'll give you my email address too. It's just my initials, tc@uga.edu. I joke that I think I have the shortest email at the University of Georgia. So feel free to use that. If our department doesn't have the answers to your questions, I know the business office will. And so I would also encourage you to potentially reach out to the Dean of Students business office with any questions you might have. This process can be a little overwhelming. We recognize that. And so we want to make sure we provide as much support, resources, and information to help you be successful in this process. Our goal as ELS is for you to be able to make your best case, to make your best argument, to get the money that you need to be successful. And so we're happy to help through that process at all, in any way that we can. So if we don't have any questions, we'll stick around for a couple more minutes, but at this time, we'll let folks kind of get on out of here and enjoy the rest of their evening. Thank you again for everyone who attended. And again, we'll send out the recording hopefully by tomorrow, if not Monday morning, to everyone to view at their own time. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great night. All right, well.